guys, Cherry Pals here. As I'm sure my friends know, I'm a huge Mystery Dungeon guy. I absolutely adore Explorers Sky. Super Mystery Dungeon is phenomenal. Gates to Infinity is one of the games of all time, but I got to thinking recently, when's the last time I actually played the original game that kicked off this love of the side series for me? Red Rescue Team. Correct answer to that would be during COVID times, but for a more casual playthrough that wasn't part of a recording marathon where I just sat back and enjoyed myself, much longer. Whilst I collected the time gears and slapped Dialga's neck several times over in that stint. Red Rescue Team, as well as its counterpart on the DS Blue Rescue Team, will be the games that we're exploring today. Their quirks, their messaging, and just what kind of space this game holds for me. If you're new to the Mystery Dungeon series, take a dive with me through the magic of Mystery Dungeon's characterization and world building. If you're a Mystery Dungeon vet, sit back and walk down memory road with me. At the end of the day, I just want to highlight and showcase a game that left me not only with a greater appreciation for Pokemon, but for storytelling as a whole. Now, with all that said, let's get into the plot, starting with the all-important personality quiz. How much would I spend to spend time with Andrew Garfield? How the hell did that get in there? Now we're talking. Answer, by the way, a lot more than that. While the questions about tests and the like may seem silly to an adult, each answer does have some significance as to which starter you'll end up getting, with the answer correlating to a nature that's matched up with one of the starter Pokemon you're able to receive at the end of a quiz. Answer honestly if you want to know more about yourself, or if you want a very specific starter, look up a guide online so you can rush the game down as best you can with Charmander. As these are Generation 3 titles, a newcomer would most likely just expect the 9 regular starters and that's it. But Mystery Dungeon does a smart move by opening the door for a number of Pokemon that you can land on, depending on your answers. Pikachu, Meowth, Psyduck, Machop, Cubone, Eevee, and Skitty. Skitty probably seems like the oddest choice, especially given there's already a Generation 1 cat in the mix. But believe me when I say Skitty is so strong and so perfectly kitted for Mystery Dungeon that Skitty makes Mewtwo look like any Magikarp that you can get with an old rod in comparison. Normally when I take the personality test, I'd land on the likes of Charmander or Mudkip if I were to answer as male, or Pikachu or Bulbasaur if I answered female. But when I envisioned the thumbnail for this video, Skitty was the only one that came to mind as the one squaring off against Rayquaza. As for my partner choice, Chikorita, she doesn't really get much in the way of tools in a regular learn set, but figured she'd be a good balance to all the hands Skitty would be throwing. At any rate, with our Pokemon chosen, we dive into an all-new world. One comfy and vibe, but danger lurking just around the corner. We start off with near-perfect amnesia, as one does, at the outskirts of a forest only to be woken up by our partner, Chikorita. As for the name Paula, by the way, that comes from Mario Tennis Power Tour. You'll learn very quickly I'm not a nicknames guy. I just wanted to show that off now in case I do any challenge runs in the future. Cool. Anywho, with knowledge of only our name and former identity as a human, as amnesia is known to work, we're quickly tasked with finding Butterfree's child, Caterpie. The only Caterpie in the world, I'm sure, definitely, absolutely. Caterpie is just a few floors in our very first dungeon, Tiny Woods, where you get to learn the core mechanics of the game, such as movement, use at least one move to give a regular amount of EXP when defeating an enemy, and how to square off in combat against your opponents. While the game is turn-based, there is no timer. Enemies will only move and attack after you do. So if you end up in a precocious situation, you can think your way out of it. Usually. Sometimes you'll just be dead braining it and get yourself killed. Oops. After a very short stint, Caterpie is able to be saved, and it's through this rescue that Butterfree really could have been able to done herself, that you're able to get a good sense of a game's cycle. Dive into dungeons, explore, do some rescues, get out, rinse, repeat. It gives a good sense of purpose in an unfamiliar world, you know? We begin our rescue team here at this point, and thanks to the same lack of creativity I felt when staring the default name Pokepals in the face playing Explorers of Darkness, Team Joy Pals is born. The beginning portion of the game will follow a very similar formula to the Caterpie mission for its first few beats, while slowly raising the stakes for each rescue you do. Thunderwave Cave sees you trying to separate two magnets, which good luck with that with a total 0 thumbs. Mount Steel has you saving a Diglett that was somehow airlifted by Skarmory. Metapod need be saved from Team Meanies, as if that's the only Metapod in the world, because of course. And the Pokemon in this world in general need help, as they and their friends all keep getting stuck in Thunderwave Cave in places they really shouldn't be near. It's in this beginning portion that you can really see just how strong Skitty is and how much Chikorita lags behind. Let's use this mark here, the level I was at right before meeting Team Meanies. It's not much growth, sure, but by that time Skitty's already picked up its second most powerful tool in its entire arsenal, Attract. A level 7 move Skitty will be able to use to wonderful effect, from the very first boss fight against Skarmory to keep its pal Chikorita safe. Mystery Dungeon in general doesn't really work with gender, to where even genderless Pokemon like Beldum can be hit with the move Attract no problem. In addition to that though, unlike the mainline titles where it's a will they won't they on if the Pokemon affected by Attract will even move, Attract will act somewhat akin to sleep mechanics in the mainline titles, where the opponent will need to spend several turns trying to get out of the status just to do one action. It's honestly quite menacing, and allows Skitty to disable pretty much every boss, no problem. Chikorita, meanwhile, does get Razor Leaf, which is nice for chip EXP across the room when you don't feel like interacting with your 40-second Metatite and Mount Steel, as well as Reflect. But they're not game changers in the same way that Attract really is, creating that much more of a divide between you and your partner. This division in power will be exasperated by our very next mission, Mount Thunder. Unlike the last two missions, this one comes with a tinge of danger, as Jumpluff's friend, Jumpluff 2, has been caught between some rocks that have been thrown in the path it was following from the breeze. Local celebrity explorer Alakazam is able to coax local Wario wannabe Shiftry into getting Jumpluff free thanks to Shiftry's leafy fans that are able to stir up winds. But Shiftry has been gone for a while. Way longer than it should when the Pokemon in the dungeon where Jumpluff stuck, Silent Chasm, are only level 10 to 11 for the most part. As it turns out, there's been 0 winds blowing in the area at all, which is quite unusual. So unusual, in fact, that it's angered the electric bird that stayed consistently powerful across the decades, Zapdos. Zapdos, in a rage, decides to kidnap Shiftry shortly after we rescue Jumpluff, blaming Shiftry for disturbing its slumber thanks to Shiftry's winds tearing a thundercloud into 2. With Zapdos taking Shiftry to its own personal mountain, our team, as well as Alakazam's team, Team ACT, head up the mission to free the long-nosed money grubber from the grip of an angry Thunderbird. Right before the fight against Zapdos though, I'm able to get Skitty to level 15 to get its most powerful tool, Double Slap. The way damage works in Mystery Dungeon is funky, with weaker moves like one of Double Slap's hits, emphasis on one, not being that much worse off than the likes of Body Slam. There's a whole Reddit thread in the description for you to read if you'd like to know more, but by that same token, you don't really need to. Double Slap, being a multi-hit move, ends up going crazy as a result of the damage formula, especially by the time we hit the post-game, which, mixed with Attract, means Skitty's going to be able to put up some huge numbers in the long run. Chikorita will soon get her own similar tool, but in time. With hands successfully being thrown at Zapdos and Shiftry being saved, we get some minor intrigue from Alakazam. The revelation of the hero Pokemon being human isn't anything new by this point, but Alakazam still lingers on the thought, long enough to where he seems troubled by something. Nothing to disclose yet, however. After going through Great Canyon, complemented by a very lovely song, our next plot beat takes us to Xatu, thanks to Alakazam's recommendation at the apex of Mount Thunder. Per Alakazam, Xatu may know something as to why we've turned into a Pokemon, and nope. Xatu does disclose that our becoming a Pokemon and the world's balance being disturbed, aka why more natural disasters have been happening, why more mystery dungeons have been cropping up, and why Kecleon is able to sell premium goods at such low prices, are linked together in some fashion. Not great. Even worse, the weirdly influential Gengar of Team Meanies was eavesdropping in on the whole conversation. And if you know anything about Gengar, it's going to act fast. Next day delivery on that, actually, as Gengar is able to work up the entire town that you're the human and the folktale about the Ninetales curse. To break this down for you, you see all those fluffy tails Ninetales has? How you want to grab one and brush out any kinks or gunks that it may have accumulated? Yeah, don't do that. You'll be cursed big time if you do. One human was foolish enough to do this, but instead of taking the brunt of Ninetales' power, it ended up being that human's Gardevoir. Ninetales gave the option to the human to save Gardevoir, but Bro ended up bolting faster than a Union Buster would bolt over to a store the moment they caught wind the employees actually wanted livable wages. For an act so cowardly, so ghoulish, Ninetales essentially laid a second curse, that the human would one day be reborn as a Pokemon. Pair of the knowledge Xatu imparted with the impression that this human is just the worst, Gengar gets to work on painting you as a huge target for the town, literally setting up a refugee arc that sees you running basically to the other side of a continent in search of safety. Very early on in this refugee arc, in Lapis Cave, I was able to find Paula a very important TM that made her damage input higher than Skitty's for the remaining boss fights of the main campaign, Bullet Seed. A grass-type multi-hit move that works off of Chikorita's better special attack stat, in a game where most of the main campaign bosses lean more physically bulky, in combination with a special band I gave a little dinosaur pair way earlier on in the run. The move really ended up bailing me out, as I feel if I didn't find Bullet Seed, I'd have been struggling a lot more and a lot longer against Mount Blaze's Moltres and especially against Frosty Forest's Articuno, since I'm opting not to use Makuita Dojo at any point during the campaign. Articuno in particular is a menace, as it's the first boss to use a room-wide move in Powder Snow. Unlike Razor Leaf or Bullet Seed, which travel in a straight line, or the likes of Thunderbolt, which can get around corners and hallways, or the regular damaging attacks, Powder Snow will hit every enemy in the room, creating a very potent attack as a result. Given Chikorita as a grass type, not great. Attract is able to mitigate the threat quite significantly though. While the legendaries dwell on the natural disasters and how things are just getting worse and worse, the player's Pokemon ends up dwelling on their own purpose here. Why are we continuing to run? Just to survive? Or is there a greater purpose for us to fulfill? It's a set of questions that become a lot more prevalent for people once they reach the point of college and branching out into the real world, trying to find their place in a swarm of uncertainty both in terms of a workplace and just what they want to venture toward in this lifetime. In the case of our party Pokemon, now including an Absoline named Ootly, because again, I should not be in charge of nicknaming, they decided that their escape needed to carry on, that no matter what dangers they face, that the truth needed to be discovered. Discovering that truth can be a hard and painful road, as we can see with just how far our next dungeon, Mount Freeze, is from Pokemon Square. Before that though, we get some reassurance and guidance from a Gardevoir that's been mentioned and seen a few times prior. I haven't really mentioned it, but the Gardevoir from the Ninetales legend has actually been popping up in the dreams of our hero character, hinting at the purpose that this human-turned Skitty could possibly serve. Gardevoir will serve a greater purpose later, but for now, they let us know that Mount Freeze and Ninetales are directly ahead. The climb up is actually relatively easy. Well, except for this time where I died like a silly, but hey, password system for revival, huh? No? Okay. Up top, Team Act catches up to our party honestly way later than a team composing of two of the best Pokemon in the game and Tyranitar should have. Still spurred on by the claims of Gengar, Ninetales swoops down to cease this foolishness at once though, letting us know that the hero is not the one in the Ninetales curse. This obviously comes as a sweet relief for our partner, but then that begs the question, who was that human? And more importantly, who are we? Before we can get any answers on anything, including why on earth Alakazam believed Gengar of all things without looking into anything, the ground starts to shake vigorously. You see, we're in a Generation 3 title, and that can only mean one thing. Groudon's come to wreck house and be weak to water. Fortunately for Groudon, Kyogre's locked to the post-game, and it didn't go with the much better Psyduck and its Cloud9 as a partner. So the battle is indeed an uphill one, steeped in terrible difficulties. Or it would be, if I didn't know what it was doing these days. Alakazam, in his obvious infinite wisdom, decides to sideline our team after we just took down a burning rubber chicken and frostbitten bird because clearly we're just not tough enough, opting to head underground with only his team to quell a rampaging Titan. Yeah, good luck with Tyranitar in your fiber seeds, buddy. This leaves us with the task of heading back to town to tell everyone that, hey, the liar is indeed a liar. Gengar starts quickly demanding physical proof, something I can't even conjure up as to what that would even look like. But fortunately, we got Caterpie on our side to convince everyone that Gengar is indeed a big, stinky, lying, poopy doo-doo head. Mix that with a breaking news bulletin from Pelipper with testimony from Alakazam and Ninetales. Gengar is cooked in expeditious manner. The lives of the party are able to return to normal for a brief time, which means just regular exploration work. Well, that and having a contract to make you to redesign our house because, hey, every good anime needs at least one filler episode while there's an impending big bad that we should seriously be taking care of right in this moment, right? By the time our little flip this house adventure ends, the rest of the team realizes that Alakazam and crew have been gone for a really long time, like too long. Again, I blame Tyranitar. After some panic sets in, a few Pokemon who genuinely should have no problem in the dungeon step up to the plate. Blastoise and Octillery, both from different teams. Golem's there too, I guess. And seriously, this is just gonna be a Tyranitar situation again. They're not even gonna make it to floor 14. And oh wow, they didn't even make it to floor 9. Team Joy Pals then finally steps up to the bat after Paula works up the courage to keep the spark of hope alive for the townsfolk, allowing us to finally have access to Magma Cavern. All I gotta say is, wow, either I got really lucky or this dungeon was really, really easy. I think it comes down to the fact that I didn't really run into any monster houses, but even if I did, I had a game plan by that point. Back up into a hallway and let Paula open fire with Bullet Seed. Double Slap is able to cut through even resistances by this point, meaning even the likes of Steelix didn't really pose much of a challenge as we traversed the 20 odd floors. If anything, Groudon was the only issue due to how both Double Slap and Bullet Seed were doing a pittance. But then again, it's a late story boss, on how you expect it to go. After knocking Groudon out and rescuing Alakazam, Xatu sends out his own breaking news bulletin about something he probably should have been able to foresee and work on stopping about 4 story dungeons ago. There's a giant meteor heading toward the Earth at an insanely fast rate. Like seriously, Xatu dropped the ball on this one hard. Fortunately, Psychic types are still good and move relatively fast in Generation 3, so Alakazam and Xatu devise a plan to send both you and your partner up into the clouds to get in contact with Rayquaza to stop this meteoric threat. There's also a third Pokemon that helps create the MacGuffin that's able to make this all possible, a Teleport Gem. But that third one's probably not important, right? Before we're set into the sky, Gardevoir appears to us to let us know that stopping this meteor is indeed our purpose for existing in this world as a Pokemon, and once that's accomplished, we get to go back to being a human. It adds a bittersweetness to the mission, but one that gives a direct goal for the ending of a game. Sky Tower, just like everything else, proved to be relatively easy in the grand scheme of things, thanks to Double Slap just tearing through everything and... oh. Wait, I got spawned in the middle of a monster house. Can we get the proper tape, please? Much better, much better. Just a 20-ish minute climb up Sky Tower's total 34 floors so that we can meet the big green Sky Lizard. Said Sky Lizard isn't really an issue thanks to a track to just being that damn powerful, but I think it's worth pointing out just how little damage Skitty is doing here with Double Slap, while Paula is doing double the damage with Bullet Seed. Special Band goes crazy, what can I say? Doing literally any of Makuita's training dungeons or more rescue missions would have helped out with this a fair bit, but oh well. we live and learn. Once we finally do enough chip damage to defeat Rayquay, the party Pokemon are able to get Badoo to notice that, hey, there's a big-ass rock coming for your head just 50 feet above you. This Rayquaza blind as all hell. Must be the sun since he never comes down to the ground. Fortunately though, Bro gets the hint and launches a giant Hyper Beam, destroying the meteor and nearly killing both Skitty and Chikorita in the process. Gengar, being the troll he is, tries to drag us to the PG version of hell, but thanks to some conflicting emotions, actually brings us back to safety, taking the party to the Hill of Ancients where Xatu and the townsfolk are waiting. Gengar, by the way, was that third Pokemon who helped create the Teleport Gem. Again, there's some conflicting emotion stuff that kind of led to the turnabout, but you know what? Not right now. Not the time. You know what it is time for, though? The time to say goodbye to everyone. Naturally, everyone's confused and upset over such a powerful Titan, such as 6 damage double slap attract wielding Skitty, just randomly vanishing, especially when the cat is such a rarity in this world. But there's a lesson to be learned there, that paths are always meant to split off at some point or another. No one is in anyone's life for forever, so all you can really do is make the most of the time that you have with that person. A simple message, but a powerful one to put into a kid's game. After some talk, Skitty turns into some yellow bubbles and floats back up into the sky, returning back to the human world. The credits roll, and yeah, no, Skitty's not going to want to be a human again. Who the hell would ever want that? There is a lot of post-game to get through after all. Actually, a much meatier post-game than the regular campaign. I do want to pose one question for now before we jump into that post-story though. What about the friends and family of the hero Pokemon when they were a human? Do they just have to accept that their friend or child is suddenly just completely gone without a trace because they want to go slap a Mewtwo senseless? Then again, we are talking about the Pokemon world where Drifloon and more horrifyingly Hypno exists. Ugh. Probably not best to think on it for too long. So hey, into the post-game we go. Calling the post-game of Mystery Dungeon Red and Blue Rescue Team a hodgepodge would be a disservice to hodgepodges. There's so many little things that pop up or take minor town investigation that everything kind of feels like its own very special episode that focuses on its own legendary or legendaries. While some of these things require other missions to be done, I'll just tackle all this in the order I did things. First things first, and everyone's natural starting point, we hear word of a very rough and treacherous sea that Lombre of all Pokemon got absolutely bodied in. A stormy sea, if you will. Before we go in though, I decided to evolve Paula into a Bayleaf. While that added power boost is certainly appreciated, it does also break the flow you've been working with since the very start, where your partner no longer wakes you up to start the day off. You don't travel in town together anymore or anything. Your co-founder just becomes another team member, and that's a little sad, I think. We really decided not to go back to being a human for this? At any rate, Bayleaf in tow, training session flopped against Blastoise, who again should have had no issues in Magma Cavern, I blame Golem. We are able to make our way through the stormy sea. While the dungeon itself poses no issues, Kyogre allows me to talk about legendary recruitment. It's very annoying. Unlike the other games where you're guaranteed the recruitment after either the first or second fight, the legendaries have their own recruitment rates. I haven't talked about recruitment at all during this whole thing, but basically if you KO a Pokemon with your leader, you have a percentage chance of being able to make that Pokemon your friend. In Red and Blue Rescue Team, a whole 2 factors swing this percentage. What level your team leader is, and if the team leader is holding a friend bow. Nothing else matters. Kyogre at least has a 50% recruitment rate and can be recruited on the first go, so it's not too much of an issue for the big fish. It's just funny having to turn our partner Pokemon into the attract machine so that Skitty has more time to slap the bosses silly. After the fish fight, I decided to go after the Kanto birds next, as we'll need them for Lugia's dungeon later on. Zapdos was relatively simple, where Moltres and Articuno took 2 tries each. Honestly, I just blame the lack of reviver seeds I had at the time. Their names ended up being Watt, Kelvin, and Frostburn, respectively. All I needed to do from there was talk to Alakazam to unlock a flag for free to create a stone so that I can go through a 99 floor dungeon to go slap Lugia, but I forgot, so that dude'll come later. Instead, I opted for 2 different trips through Solar Cave. Should have just been one, but hey, I forgot cats can't really swim. While there, I picked up 2 important things. A link cable that'll be important much later, and the HM Surf so that I can explore more dungeons because yes, even in a side series, you cannot escape the necessity of HMs in early Pokemon. Surf's not really needed for our next dungeon, Buried Relic, so not entirely sure why I did Solar Cave before Buried Relic in hindsight. Anyway, the Reggies live here as well as Mew, I think because of the Lucario movie that was coming out at the time, but more importantly there's stuff buried in the walls, which is cool. I think I only ever found 2 things in my explorations trying to recruit before legendaries here, but it does mean you have a use for Rock Smash. I ended up giving it to Ootly twice, just for fun of it. I tried going back in to recruit the Reggies on my second trip, but Regirock's recruitment rate was 0.1%. I'd yet to get the friend bow, and Skitty was only level 34, meaning my recruitment odds were still sub 10%. I visited 2 trios, so hey, why not a third? Spinda, a forever dizzy traveler, opens up this plotline for us, looking to meet the Mirage Pokemon, complete with a clear wing that's supposed to act as a key. A second trek up to the Hill of Ancients lends us an answer from Xatu, that we're to go to the Northwest Island to meet Entei first and foremost in the hunt to meet this Mirage. So long as you have Surf, which fortunately we do. If you've played any of the Gen 2 games and seen that there's multiple terrains on the map, you already know how this is going to go. Put Entei's fire out, ground Raiku's electricity, and evaporate Suicune's clean water in order to reach Ho-Oh. All of these fights ended up being very easy, as now Skitty's double slaps were beginning to ramp up in power, meaning each attack could feasibly do over 100 damage in a turn. Entei got knocked out by a 4 damage standard attack by Charmander, by the way, gotta love it. Unfortunately, the beasts, as well as Ho-Oh, cannot be recruited on their first encounter, but along the way to Ho-Oh, I am able to get myself a friend bow, locked away on Mount Faraway's 30th floor. Ho-Oh has a nearly guaranteed recruitment rate for the second time around forward, so I decided to knock that part out right away, and finally claim gay rights after all of these hours. Still can't get Regirock, by the way, that bastard. After a cutscene where I'm now able to go visit Mewtwo, the next stop on my docket was the Lottie Twin plotline. There's not really much going on with this one, I'll be honest. Latios got hit with a chunk of meteor, Rayquaza shattered at the end of the main campaign. Latios decided to steal TMs instead of Reviver Seeds, Thornberries, or an escape orb, or anything to try to help her, and it's tasked to Team Joey Pals to both catch the thief and rescue Latios once we hear Latios' reasoning for the theft. I guess the lesson here is stealing is justified if it's for a good cause? Hell if I know. I ended up naming these 2 Hunter and Scarlet after the Johansons, a celebrity twin duo I think about equally as often, so much so I didn't realize Scarlet had 2 T's in her name. Oops. Western Cave, a 99 floor dungeon with Mewtwo, comes next, and this is where power scaling actually goes crazy. Western Cave is filled with a lot of high EXP yield Pokemon, but more importantly, at this point of the game, there is a load of vitamins you can find at pretty much any point littered around the dungeon. I ended up finding so many proteins and calciums that I nearly 2-shot Mewtwo on my first visit. Yes, first. Mewtwo is programmed not to come with you on your first go-around regardless of how much respect he's gained for your abilities to slap. Second go-around though? No problem. Had Skitty done just 1 more slap, the second go-around would have been a 1-shot, but such is the gamble with multi-hit moves. For Mewtwo's name, I decided to play into the Pokemon's ego and go with a very stupid pun. Mew who? After Mewtwo, I decided to pull out the old Google machine to remind myself on how to recruit Lugia, which, yes, turns out the flag was hidden behind Alakazam all this time. Little psychic cat bastard. For this dungeon, we need a dive, but hey, we still have that TM, no worries. After a first attempt where Skitty slapped itself to death 31 floors in, the second attempt went a lot smoother. I think the coolest thing about Silver Trench is the fact that some floors are guaranteed floor-wide monster houses, really making it a game of if you can escape the horde or if you need to fight everything off in a flurry. Thunderbolt, a TM I picked up ages ago, does wonders in this kind of scenario, as it's able to hit every opponent that's next to the Pokemon using it. Even nicer though, Lugia is able to be recruited on the first go-around. Naturally, I decided to name it Gay Wrongs, because behind every gay person is a more cunning, more evil gay, and we support them. Deoxys is the next one on the docket, and is another one of those Pokemon that was affected by Rayquaza screaming at a giant space rock. Before I took on Deoxys in Meteor Cave though, I decided to eat my way through a Joy Seed stack I'd been making for myself, sending Skitty to level 98 to max out my recruitment rate. Still not really that high of a boost for what I need, but hey, gotta make do with what you have. Back to Deoxys though, Deoxys' dungeon has a cool gimmick in that you're only allowed a very select number of items that you can take into the dungeon, and Phantoms of Deoxys in its various forms must be defeated in order to unlock the stairs. Normally this would just create an issue with food and moves, but given just how strong Skitty is now, just a simple click of the A button is usually enough to delete the Phantoms, no problem. I ended up naming Deoxys Plasmius after some light RNG manipulation. Not exactly a fit for the Danny Phantom antagonist, but literally the only name that was coming to mind outside of DNA. Once Deoxys is cleaned up, it's time to do some other cleanup and go on a legendary recruiting spree before what I like to call the post-post game. I ended up needing to grab the beasts, the Reggies, Mew, Groudon, and Rayquaza still. Their names and the reason why I really should not be in charge of nicknaming anything in order: Mufasa, Bolt, Bubbles, Dwayne, JLo, Clint, Genesis, Terrence, and Reginald. Reginald, by the way, extremely close to being named Skylander, but that felt a little too off. Yet I thought Reginald was okay. Weird tastes, I'm aware. With almost every legendary and their grandma recruited, I start the final post-game plotline. Really what I'd call the post-post game, since to kick this plot off you need to finish the Lottie Twins arc and get a specific friend area, an area where a few evolutionary families like Wigglytuffs and Blissies live, but most importantly, Gardevoirs. It starts off with talking with Ekans and Medicham by Whiscash's Pond, off of their own adventure trying to explore an area where wishes can come true. Naturally, Ekans can't do crap, and Medicham ends up getting stuck 20 floors in. Ekans desperately needs help at this point, and thus turns to Team Joey Pals to explore Wish Cave, one of 3 99-floor reset dungeons in the game. Fortunately for my planning, 20 floors isn't a rough ask at all. This dungeon, as well as the other 2, are where that link cable we got from Solar Cave will come into play. As we'll take an Abra I picked up in Solar Cave much later on that I named Spoons, throw it into an evolution chamber, and come out with an Alakazam who has Teleport in its level 1 Learn Kit and has some very tanky stats for the early portions of a reset dungeons. Medicham is, of course, thankful, and will eventually want us to look into Gengar, who they haven't seen in a fair bit, as he's on an escapade himself to try to climb Mount Freeze. But before we tackle that, I'd like to talk about the free reset dungeons really quick. Joyous Tower is the easiest of the 3, mostly serving as a way to accumulate Joy Seeds, as well as offer a chance at recruiting a bunch of the starters and some rare Pokemon to come across, such as Chansey, something I never even saw him climb up. You can carry items with you, meaning you can very easily give yourself the perfect kit to make your climb a cinch. You could do 3 party members as well, but nah. Big thing to carry in, a TM for Frustration, since that'll do a set 45 damage with minimum IQ. Just don't eat gummies. Gummies raise IQ, and Frustration works off of being dumb, but we'll cover those in more detail come a future Explorers of Sky video. Anywho, Wish Cave sits perfectly in the middle of the 3 dungeons, with the main difference being that there's a Jirachi boss fight at the very end. The exploration was easy with Alakazam plus Frustration once again, but the boss fight actually wasn't too bad. I got close to using a Reviver Seed actually, but not bad at all. Winning the fight granted me Fantasy. Fanta-C? Eh? Who could have granted me wishes if I said, nah fam, to its own wish to join Team Joey Pals, but that'd be greedy, and I didn't want to do the dungeon again. Last dungeon to tackle, Purity Forest. Easily the hardest of the 3 since you can't bring in items, and you can only bring in a single party member. I got incredibly lucky. On the very first floor next to the stairs, I found a Warp Scarf. Warp Scarves are an involuntary teleport, activating every couple steps. Since my main strategy was teleport, however, what the item ended up doing was creating a slot machine type effect, where so long as I didn't step on a trap that gunked up my items, I was golden. Within the first dozen floors though, I did also find a no stick cap, which I equipped after landing in a room with the stairs to get around that effect no problem. After making it to floor 99, I was able to meet Celebi, who fortunately does not offer up a boss fight. The name, Selby, because again, bad at nicknames. Joy's Tower very easily could have been broken up into a couple optional dungeons as to make it less pointless, but Wish Cave and Purity Forest both offer up incredibly strong challenges should you not be prepared or knowledgeable, as I was going into this. With all that said, it's time to finally get back to Gardevoir and Gengar. As an astute player may have pieced together by now, Gengar is actually the human from a Ninetales legend. You can see it in the thoughtful expression he has after eavesdropping on Xatu, how Gengar runs away crying after peering into a dream of yours in which Gardevoir is speaking to you, and Gengar's help during the Rayquaza plotline, among other things. It's a classic case of a human dichotomy, but spun the other way around, knowing nothing but evil and mischievousness, but wanting to turn a new leaf to start anew. Naturally, Gengar just can't be a good Pokemon out of nowhere. He still has to be his egotistical and brash self, basically taunting the player into helping him climb Mount Freeze in order to meet Ninetales. Right choice of companion there, Gengar, given what point in the game we're in and how heavily Skitty can slap everything. Once we get through that relatively short excursion, Ninetales and Gengar have a nice little chat about how ridiculous Gengar is to want the curse suddenly lifted without seeming to have learned any lesson at all. Ninetales does at least provide some sort of solution though. To take a rock representative of Ninetales' curse to a dungeon called Murky Cave. Not a terribly long dungeon at all, or even hard outside of the fact that nothing spawns in the cave but enemies and money. If I didn't do everything else first, maybe this part would have posed a challenge, but for my final dungeon, a bit anticlimactic. Worth noting, though, is Gengar's learn set through this escort part of the game. Taunt's normal, but the other moves consist of Leer, Scratch, and Quick Attack. Not moves Gengar would really want to use anyway, but not ones that naturally learns. My hypothesis as to why this ended up being the moveset ties back to Gengar's brash human nature, willing to throw down and get into scraps instead of resolving anything with reason. Taunt's fair to goad the enemies into a certain response, while Quick Attack could be more of an emotional response to get the first hit in, before his enemies could hurt Gengar's human version any. It's something interesting to think about, honestly. At any rate, at the end of a trek, a disembodied voice starts booming through a relatively small room, claiming to be a Judge of Darkness, who could potentially lift the curse. Knowing of Gengar's trickery, though, this mysterious judge has the player try to answer the questions in lieu of Gengar. We failed, but hey, gave it a try. And now he's crying. Oh no. Gengar ends up having an emotional breakdown, at this point really just wanting to bring Gardevoir back to the physical world and have any sort of way to make it up to a former companion, a former friend. This emotional outcry is enough for the curse to finally be lifted, and Gardevoir is able to return to being a full-fledged Pokemon once more. Sure, the memories are gone, but it's a new beginning, one without the pain of a memory for Gardevoir, and one where past actions are no longer the judge for Gengar. For Team Joy Pals, we're able to score Gardevoir as recruits, a more symbolic one than anything given where we are in the journey. With one last bad nickname in Gardenia, our trek through Mystery Dungeon, Red and Blue Rescue Team comes to a close. Mystery Dungeon Red and Blue Rescue Team is one of those first childhood games I was able to get my hands on, where I actually felt like I was doing something impactful with my time. Sure, it was for digital monsters in a fantasy world, but just that feeling of being able to make a difference on the world around me and have my choices matter goes such a long way for a developing mind. In particular for me, it's that scene during the refugee arc where you're staring at Mount Blaze on your way to Frosty Forest, faced with a tough dilemma to keep going despite the conditions or to just give up, that stands out of my mind whenever I think about this game. A key memory, if you will, and it stands out as one of the first pieces of media I took in where it asked the participant to continue seeking out the truth no matter what obstacles lay ahead. Life gets hard sometimes, and you may need to seek help. Just remember that whatever lies on the other side of that hill will be worth it. Could be a prize or truth about yourself, but never stop exploring, never stop wondering just what might be out there for you to find. If you're still here at the end of the video, thank you so much for watching this little look back at a childhood classic. Review videos in general aren't typically in my wheelhouse, But I realized I've been on YouTube for nearly a decade and haven't really done anything with Mystery Dungeon. Given how strongly I feel about the series, I knew I needed to change something. Please, if you enjoyed the video, give the video a like and subscribe if you feel so inclined. I really want to see if I can hit 5,000 subscribers by the end of 2025. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on Red and Blue Rescue Team, as well as the experiences you've had with the game, and what other games you'd like me to tackle in the future. For now, my name is Jerry Pal signing out. See ya!